I'm going to focus on the basic agronomic aspects of canola production. First of all, I want to acknowledge my colleague, Brian Hansen. He was a research agronomist at our center. He retired recently. Um, he is the one who conducted a lot of research on canola, and I'm going to present a lot of his data today. So, a little introduction about the canola crop for those who are new to canola. Canola is a specific edible type of rapeseed with an oil percentage of 40%. And most of the varieties of canola that are grown in United States have a very low erucic acid content, which is less than 2%, and less than 30 micromoles of glucosinolates per gram of seed. And this is like Barry said in his presentation, this is one of the most heart-healthy oils with the least saturated fat of all the common culinary oils. And also again, quoting Barry, North Dakota is the lead producer in canola in the United States with an approximate 85% of US production. And just in 2024, we grew 2.5 million, 1.5 million acres and produced about 4 billion pounds of canola in North Dakota. So this is a map showing the different counties and the acreage in different counties. And you can see most of the acreage is concentrated in the northern tier, northern half of the state, but it is very encouraging to see how it's spreading all over the state. So there are a lot of producers who are interested in growing canola in North Dakota. So I'm glad I am going after Brian's wheat presentation and Venkat's disease presentation, because they talk a lot about the canola crop rotations, and crop rotation is especially very important in canola crop when we have to discuss about weed issues and disease issues. And in the general recommendation for crop rotation in canola is a minimum of 2 to 3 years. And canola is, the research shows like canola best follows cereals. And like Brian said or stated in his presentation, rotating the crop rotation will give you options, herbicide options, and that would help in reducing the herbicide resistant weeds. And also, canola has a shattering problem, and that leads to a lot of volunteers. And by rotating the crops, the herbicide options we have will help with managing the volunteer population. The second most important consideration for crop rotation in canola is diseases. There are a lot of painful diseases in canola, or like nasty diseases in canola. They are clubroot, verticillium stripe, blackleg, and sclerotinia. And if you want to manage or get a handle of these diseases, crop rotation is very important. And like Venkat said, it is very important to get a handle of these diseases, and the only way, or the cheapest and the most efficient way you can do to reduce these diseases is by following a good crop rotation. Venkat says 4 years, especially for diseases like clubroot and verticillium stripe. That plays a very important role. For diseases like clubroot and blackleg, it is also important that we rotate the resistant varieties, and when we, along with the crop rotation, that will help to lengthen the shelf life of these resistant genes or varieties. Otherwise, following a close rotation with the same resistant varieties year after year would lead to situations like breakdown of resistance, just like we are seeing in clubroot. So There was a crop rotation study that was conducted in 2013 to 2016 at three different locations in North Dakota, and they looked at if there is an effect on canola yield if canola is planted after wheat or soybeans. And they found that there are no significant differences in the yield or total weight, plant density, protein, and oil. No differences in any of these characteristics when canola was planted after wheat or soybeans. And also very little disease was observed at any of these locations. And this is a study that was conducted in Manitoba, and you can focus on this in this row, in this column. You can see, like, obviously you don't want to go canola after canola because that will be a recipe for yield losses. And the rest, majority of the crops, you can grow any of these crops that are in blue, but you want to stay away from those that are in the white. And especially sunflower, you have the least yield, growing canola after sunflowers. And also, some yield reductions are noticed in our growing canola after oats or barley. So this is a Canadian study. So everybody knows that canola is a small seed, and so when there is a small seed to grow, seedbed preparation becomes very important to the success of a crop, and especially it applies to canola. Canola is very susceptible to soil crusting, so it is always important to seed canola into a firm or well-packed seedbed. And since it's a small seed depth is very shallow, less than an inch, and for rapid emergence, optimum seed to soil contact with enough moisture is very important. So make sure that we have moisture within that 1 inch of the soil surface. And always it's important, or it's advantageous to plant canola into warm soils, especially at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, because warm soils means rapid emergence and then rapid growth of the seedling. So this is a study that shows, like, how the soil crusting affects the canola emergence. On the x-axis, you can see the crust strength or the hardness of the soil crust, and on the y-axis we see the emergence percentage. You can see, like, as the hardness of the crust increases, the emergence percentage drops significantly. And the other thing, this picture, I got it from Venkat, because to show that canola doesn't like wet conditions, especially at the seedling stage. And this is what happens. He lost his entire trial because it was a wet season, a wet spring in 2024. So make sure that you're selecting the fields that have good drainage and doesn't have standing water. When it comes to seeding depth, so like I said, canola is a small seed and it needs a shallow depth, seeding depth, and aim for the ideal depth, seeding depth for canola is 1/2 to 1 inch. And sometimes in some drought years, especially like in 2023, 1.5 inches is also possible, because if that is where you find moisture, you can go up to 1.5 inches. But the more you push the seeding depth, you would run into the risk of losing emergence. And this is a study that was conducted at 8 different locations, which shows that at 3/4 inch of the seed depth, there was 80% emergence. And then by pushing the seeding depth to 1.5 inches, the emergence drops to 59%. And that is very significant. Also, at seedling stage, the physical damage, canola seedlings are very susceptible to soil crusting and frost damage in spring, and also flea beetle pressure. So make sure that these are these will be important in affecting the plant establishment. Coming to the seeding date, it varies by region in North Dakota. However, the general rule of thumb for canola is to go for early seeding because early seeding has shown to produce high yields. In North Dakota, the planting dates are from late April to mid-May. This is a general, but the exception is Northeast North Dakota, where you can push that seeding date to a little late May without any effect on the yield. And this is early planting is recommended because we are trying to avoid the risk of coinciding with the higher temperatures during the flowering. So the early seeded plants complete the flowering by the time the hot temperatures set in. So that is what we are trying to avoid. But early seeding also has some risks, and they are sometimes the cold temperatures. If you plant into cold soils, the seed will sit there for a long time, and without it will affect the germination, and sometimes the emergence is slower. And if the seed is sitting for a long time in the soil without emerging, that will result in loss of insecticide seed treatment effectiveness because it's sitting there doing nothing. And sometimes, or this is more true in Northeast North Dakota, the early planted canola is more prone to flea beetle injury because that coincides with the flea beetle emergence, and they are more, usually they are hammered with flea beetle pressure. So this is a study that was conducted at 4 different locations in North Dakota at 5 different seeding dates, and you can see in all my bad. Okay, you can see like these are the dates from late April to early June, and we have 5 different dates. And with the exception of Langdon, all the other 3 centers, Carrington, Hettinger, and Minot, they showed that like going early planting is beneficial or had good yields, and as you push that planting date to later dates, the yield kind of drops down, and sometimes when it reaches to June, it's significantly lower. But Langdon is pretty much standard. However, we still aim to plant around mid to late May. And these are the pictures taken in Langdon on July 14th, 2011. And the top 2 pictures show you the May planting dates. And you can see because they were planted in early May or mid-May, they've already completed flowering or almost done with the flowering by the time hot temperatures are setting in. Whereas if you push to June and mid-June, the flowering will coincide with the hot temperatures, and that might have an effect on pollination and pod set and seed set. So coming to the seeding rate, in canola, plant population can vary over a wide range and have very little effect on the yield. This is because canola has an ability to compensate for seedling losses and can put out more branches and thereby compensate the yield. However, the ideal seeding rate is we need to aim to establish 5 to 8 plants per square foot. That will give us the highest yield potential of 95% or more. Then dropping the plant population or plant density to 3 to 4 plants per square foot, we can still get 85 to 90%, but we are dropping a 5 to 10 percentage yield loss. And then the minimum of 2 to 3 plants per square foot, we can still achieve 60 to 80% of the yield potential, granted that this population is uniform throughout the field. So there is a wide range of plant density. Excuse me. This is a study that was conducted in Canada. And they show that the highest yield is at 5 to 8 plants per square foot density. So this is another study that reaffirms that 5 to 8 seedlings per square foot. So coming to the row spacing is also important along with the seeding rate for achieving highest yields in canola. And in canola, we recommend a narrow spacing of 12 inches or less with a plant density of 5 to 8 seedlings per square foot. This is because a narrow row spacing will will achieve uniform plant distribution and that would close the canopy much faster than a wider row spacing. Also, the plants are not competing too much for soil moisture or the nutrients and the light. So that would, narrow spacing is very efficient in canola production. However, if you are going to choose for wider rows, that is always trending to lower yields because there is not enough ground cover and there is not enough usage, or we are not utilizing that the nutrients or the moisture in that open space. So this is a study that was conducted at Langdon. This is the net return or dollars per acre at 3 row spacings averaged across 4 seeding rates and 4 seeding rates averaged across 3 row spacings. And here you can see like, the narrow row spacing of 6 to 12 inches have the highest net returns, as well as the seeding rate of 6 to 12 seeds per square foot that would give us a 5 to 8 plants per square foot is also giving us the highest net returns. So these are the pictures showing the different row spacing, 6 inch, 12 inch, and 24 inches. And you can see there is a good canopy cover in the narrow spacings of say 12 inches and less. And in 24 inches, you can see the open ground, which is we are inviting weeds to grow, right? Like if we have an open ground, weeds are opportunists and they'll take over. So this is another picture showing like how canola, when it's uniformly spaced, how it branches and it has a nice thick stem and lots of branches. Lots of branches means more pods and more seeds. However, when you go for wider spacing, then you see like the plants are so close together in the in-row spacing. They can get closer, and some plants have thicker stem, but there you can see many thin-stemmed plants which would not produce, which do not produce enough. So you'll be losing a lot of yield. So coming to the fertilizer requirements, canola is very high on nitrogen use, and most of the nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium recommendations for canola are very close to the small grain requirements. And canola responds very good to nitrogen applications on deficient soils, and for cooler moisture areas, the recommendation is 150 pounds per acre. And for warmer areas, 120 pounds per acre is recommended. For phosphorus, canola is a good scavenger of phosphorus, and it is mostly recommended as a row starter. If we apply 20 to 30 pounds of P2O5 per acre, that would be sufficient. When choosing the forms of phosphorus, make sure that you're selecting a MAP product compared to the DAP because of less nitrogen content, which reduces the seed injury. Potassium is not mostly needed. However, if needed, maybe add as a row starter, but make sure that the final nitrogen and potassium together is less than 10 pounds per acre. The final slide I have is the sulfur requirements. Sulfur is, canola has special requirements for sulfur, and it's the 4th major nutrient in canola. Low sulfur value or low sulfur levels in your field means it is a difference between a crop and a no crop. So current sulfur soil tests are not recommended or not aren't effective in estimating the sulfate levels. So in Dave Franzen's terms, it is useless. Sulfur test is useless, so don't go for it. Irrespective of whether it is a different soil texture or it's a wet or a cold or a dry year, a recommendation of 20 to 30 pounds of per acre of sulfate or thiosulfate is will give you excellent yields. And we do not recommend elemental sulfur because canola takes up sulfur in the sulfate form, and for elemental sulfur it takes a long time to break down to that sulfate form. So we do not recommend the elemental sulfur application. So that's all I have. I will stay for the Q&A session for if you have questions. Thank you.